Yay. Hi.
Hello. What a joy and what an honor and everything else to be together again. I love it.
So good. Yes. It's nice that we get an opportunity to connect and share our awarenesses and our comprehensions of what is relevant if we feel all really good about new earth emergence and how that for me in nature is able to come about, and what in human ecology there is to kind of be aware of in order for that to be able to emerge.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite you to share around New Earth communities and your experience with that, and what your comprehensions are as to what's actually really relevant to look at and to be aware of as human beings. Because my understanding is that most humans feel really resonant with the idea of community and really nice about this future fantasy of living on the land and being together and sitting around the bonfire and all the beautiful stuff. And in my comprehension, it's all actually coming down to our quality of how we're able to relate to self, which is what we talked about, relate to our soul, our spirited nature. But then how does that relating also express itself so that that aspect that we know that is our trigger points, let's call them that, can be navigated gracefully, because they're going to come to the surface anyways, because that's what happens when we co-live. And at the same time, you've been at this for a while, Yvonne, so please share.
Well, I think this is just a great conversation because of what I've noticed of late, that there are so many people out there who recognize that these new earth communities sound wonderful and they want them and they want to create them. And I was on a Zoom call last night with a whole bunch of people from around Victoria here. And I think every second person was talking about, yes, they wanted to create some sort of a healing center or some sort of a place where people could heal from the trauma of what we have been going through in the last few years, well, for the last eons. And I just sat there and listened to them, and I thought, well, yes, because that comes from this innate humanness of us, that we want to help people. And I always say that I don't want to help anybody because I so know that I attract what I put out, which means that I will only attract helpless people. I really want to attract people who are ready and are choosing to become their authentic self, and to realize that you really cannot help another until you've helped yourself. And we have to do that inner work. So it is no good going into creating communities, carrying with you the old baggage, because we're just going to recreate where we've come from. And I think it's the mindset that we need to change if we're thinking of the future or of the creation of a new earth. it cannot be using the same mindset that we have lived in this old paradigm. And that is a huge challenge, because that's all we've got until we consciously choose to change that. So I guess that's really what I'm looking at and what I'm working with the people that I'm, collecting, that are being drawn to the community that I'm forming. And it's not about the place, it's about the people. And the people that are, who are they? I had somebody come into Brecky the other day, and now she's come for private sessions. And I said, how did you feel when, you came and you met all these people? And she said, oh, they were so friendly. I said, oh, is that what you saw? And she said, yes, they were all making such an effort to make me feel good. I said, really? You think they're making an effort? And she said, so she was interpreting what she saw the only way that she knew how to interpret that. And when I then introduced her to the concept of this was not an effort, this was actually how they were, completely open-hearted and welcoming to whoever came searching for that energy. And when I offered her that picture, she went, I've never met people like you before. And so I think that's really, for me, where my attention is going, is to create the people of the new earth, and they will create the communities. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so beautiful. And I can so relate to that. I have explored the notion of sanctuaries for the new earth for a long time. And that started back in 2010, and right around the time that also the conversations with Sasha Stone started around the new earth, that language started becoming available in our collective consciousness more and more so. And I found in my understandings of that time of human ecology, as I call it now, that this idea of these co-living communities is a very complex dynamic. And so for me, I saw that if people were able to envision their own land holdings, their living space, their home as a sanctuary, and start relating to that place, to that land, or to their home from that orientation, that we can, through our intention and our focus, we can each cultivate a way of being in that space that allows us to and enables us to see things through a different lens, and treat also then that ecology and that ecosystem through that approach. And one of the things that I became aware of is that healing centers are something that is a real shared awareness for people, that is desired, it is wanted, it is seen as relevant. And that's something that I feel is a really beautiful kind of workable template for people to base their engagement in this new earth consciousness in. The reason that I say that is because we don't make changes just by intellectually updating or upgrading some concepts. We are experience-based human beings, and it's through the engagement in the physical, in the real world, that we are able to kind of allow that new language to then have an embodied experience of what it feels like to live in that way, what it looks like, and what actually is involved in the process of the day-to-day of new earth living. I'm curious if you have some thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I've just spent last week working with one of my colleagues on drawing up exactly what the sanctuary that we intend to create here on the peninsula will look like. we had to kind of, if we're going to get funding, you have to sort of write down, some sort of concept and some idea of what that's going to look like and how that's going to work. So we got, right into that. And for us, what is really so wonderful is that the people that we already have gathered, that are gathering together in this Connect to Soul community, the people we're actually building this sanctuary around. In other words, we have all the people who are already living in this new earth energetic state of consciousness in a way that is different to how they've ever lived before. So when we do actually get to that place of the sanctuary, then we have already the community that can just move into it. And I don't really see it as community living so much, rather than a place to commune, to go and communicate. And so we do intend to have some availability for some people to actually live on the premises, but that isn't the aim. And so it was really interesting to sit down and flesh that all out, because in our community, as we have it now, we have amazing artists, so of all kinds. So we decided that we wanted to have an artist or a creative center where people can explore and express their natural gifts. It may be painting, it may be pottery, it may be whatever that is. So an artist studio. We have already, I think, 5 sound healers. So I'm very keen on recreating a pyramid of sound, which you probably have gone to, the pyramids of She, and I just love having that to create. So we have the people to provide, who have already begun to live in this new earth consciousness, who are ready to then make that a reality when we create the space. And so that's really how we're looking at the concept of creating the sanctuary. It's creating the consciousness through the people who are going to be involved in it first. And that means that they all are doing their own work, their inner work. That you can't. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, when I went on this journey, was that my responsibility every day is to make sure that the channel that I use to connect with people who come to me with has to be clear. If I have a personal agenda that is yelling at me while I'm listening to the person that has come to me in full trust, then I'm not honoring them. And that is why I still get up at 5:30 every morning and I do my personal work, so that when I actually get to doing the work with another, when I come to talk with you, I am all yours. My channel is clear. There isn't a little agenda in the head saying, oh, you forgot to do this, or you should have done that. Or, I think that is a responsibility we all have to learn, that whatever we offer as a service, that it comes through a clear channel, that we take a responsibility. If I'm going to play the violin, heaven forbid, I love it, but would never be able to do it. So play the violin in an orchestra, then I have to make sure that my instrument is absolutely perfect, because if it's out of tune or whatever, then you see everybody going, I love this. And we need to fine tune our instrument. I think that is the first responsibility we have before we are able to live in the state of consciousness that the new earth requires. Is that answering your...
So beautiful. Yeah. For me, it's looking at it from a two-way stream, or a multi-stream is how it really is. That taking a singular approach for me is relevant, because it allows us to get clear and focus on what we want to accomplish. And I love this world that we live in right now. Is there's this concept of hashtags, and you probably have heard of it. You know, it's this little pound key that used to be on the old phones that we can put in front of any concept, and they're like the next succession of archetypes. And one of my favorite hashtags is do both. And so work on that creating the clarity and the attunement within, as well as which allows, of course, for that attunement to the frequencies that we want to engage with and emanate and really have come through us. Because without creating that clear vessel, it's challenging, and that goes into the food we eat, the information it goes into consumption. What do we intake? What do we intake as information, as paraphernalia of information that we can find anywhere on the web? Um, what do we bring into our minds? What do we bring into our bodies? And what do we bring into our beings through the frequencies that we can attune ourselves with? And from that place, I feel that if we haven't expanded, because it's grounding in the morning. It may be a practice of yoga. It may be a practice of centering and coming into stillness. But it's also so it's a whole series of practices that I sense that can just very easily become a way of life. And because our bodies like to get in a rhythm, and so for you, that's getting up early in the morning in order to step into that space of attunement. And that's something that for everybody would perhaps look different, but there are some very basic elements of health and well-being that I feel that have to do with our sleep, have to do with our nutrition, have to do with our breathing. And these components, and probably there's a whole bunch more, are mental aptitudes, but they're all interrelated. And so that's like a real kind of physical and maybe even intentional way of relating to doing that inner work. But you and I have spoken extensively also at the other layers of the subconscious, of the unresolved emotional imprinting, that no matter how much we attune ourselves to this higher dimensional new earth 5D consciousness and we want to be there, that doesn't dissolve. By going there, it doesn't dissolve those aspects of self that are still stuck in the stories of why they got disenfranchised from our wholeness. And I'd love you to share a little bit about that, because we've had some beautiful Brave New Life conversations as of recent, where that relating around and the sharing of our personal stories of that so-called inner child work has been more given the space to be articulated. And it's given me some great reminders again about the real relevancy of what in our foundations of being becomes whole again if we pay attention to that, and if we are willing to cultivate not just awareness but the engagement with those aspects of self. And I'd love you to share a little bit more around that.
You don't want me to leave them crying again, do you? No. Look, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful topic. And there are many ways of looking at that. But what I have found has worked for me and has healed my wounds, and I mean healed my wounds, where it no longer has a low vibrational influence on me, right? Because that is what healing really means. That, is it still having an influence on you that is taking you away from your highest self from the truth and the authentic self that you are. So what I feel is that life is an apprenticeship. And one of the things that wounds us most is that we keep the wounds alive by regurgitating the stories around those traumas, those times. You have mentioned the damaging bits and pieces. And so who is actually doing the wounding? And this is a little bit of a sensitive subject, but I've done so much work with so many people for so long that I will voice it, is that if someone comes to me and they say, you know, they were abused as a child in whatever way, and they're still suffering the pain, and my question is it happening now? The answer is always no. And then I say, then who is doing the abusing? And we self-abuse by repeating the story over and over beyond the moment. So the way that I have learned to heal that is to go back and to embrace. We look back and we want it not to have happened. We want it. We wish that it had been different. Well, it wasn't different. So accept it. And I believe we all have a soul path, and none of it is a punishment. It is to make us stronger and to learn more about what's really within us. You know, unfortunately, we are a bit sloth-like. That's not easy to say for an old Dutch lady. And, you know, we like to just sit back and be comfortable. And so that life isn't like that. And when we understand that all challenges are there to find our strength, not to collapse into as a weakness, and we can go back there, and the only way to heal any trauma is to see it as something that has made you more and has given you an opportunity to be who you are today. And until you embrace it with gratitude and love, it will continue to have power over you, and not in a good way. And so for me, I look at everything in my life as this opportunity to grow. And so I just bring it all home. As you know, on last Mondays, I did a little exercise of bringing the child home. But when you can bring all of your traumas home, to be loved by you, not to be seen as something that was wrong with you, that is the healing that we need to do. So that's how it's worked for me. And what has come out as a result of that is that I just love myself really unconditionally, no matter what mistakes I've made, no matter how many times I should have zagged, and you know, when I sort of zigged or whatever I did, I just go, well, oops, I learned from it. I'm more as a result. And that came home to me a few years ago when one of my dearest soul sisters, we were like one soul with two parallel lifetimes, we were that close, got news that her then 32-year-old son had just been diagnosed with terminal bowel cancer. And I went to see her and opened my arms to her, and I just hugged her, and she said, you know what, Vonnie, no matter what the outcome, I will become more as a result of it. And that just hit me in the heart, and I went, wow, what a statement. And she did. She did. She became so much more as a result of it. He that was gone within 8 weeks. And that, you know, she became so much more that she completed her own life within a year. Later, she left. And I always remember that. No matter what you give me, I will become more as a result of it. And that is what we have to learn. You know, when you look at what the global society is going through, unless each one becomes more as a result of it, you become a victim.
So
Yeah.
beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah, I hear so much of my own comprehensions about how life functions, and that life is here for growth and it's here for succession, one generation of plant species after the other, and in the process nature is accumulating more life density and more of its expression until it reaches its peak expression. The same goes for us as humans, and it's really questioning the function of what is coming into our worlds, because what if everything actually was here for our growth? And if we actually looked at it that way, then we were maybe able to be more curious and more open as to what life is presenting us as an opportunity, as opposed to as a faulting, or a, you know, the world is against me, or the whole universe is rah rah rah. And I see that that's something that has helped me through this syntropic way of relating to life, to cultivate that open curiosity and step out of that judgment, to just be like, oh, okay, well, this is obviously performing a function for my growth. And just to say that is already like, oh, okay, well, I've changed my mindset into an orientation that has a predisposition to be curious, how may this actually serve me? Because if we still look at it from the other perspective, that life is here to hurt me, harm me, or do me damage, well, we're still in that wounded space. And that too is, you know, okay, but it is a choice if we want to be in that. And one of my kind of one line formulas, as I kind of distill feeling based awarenesses into language, it has really been through coming into acceptance of the failure. So as a little child, we were failed. Why were we failed? Because we are wired for love. We are love-based human beings. We are actually by default entirely syntropic, which is the syntropic strategy of life is unconditional love and collaboration. And so when we weren't met, I recently came up with a beautiful new one. Love doesn't give us any dents, because it doesn't. Love is just natural. When love meets us, we feel loved, and that is actually natural. What does dent us up as younglings and as children in our formative years is whenever love didn't show up, when the father or the mother or the uncle or the government or whatever it is that is an external party that isn't who we are, they acted out of the natural order, which often is simply perceived as injustice and felt as injustice because we're wired for love. Like, why are you not loved? This doesn't make any sense. And so when we now are much older, we still sometimes feel emotional reactions coming up. Especially this past year and a half has been a great opportunity for self inner reflection, because there have been external parties and external so-called authorities doing a whole bunch of things that we would deem unjust, unfair, violations of our sovereignty, our freedom. But really, where's the kindness and where's the justice in all of this? But the reason that I found that my reactions have come out is because it's a place of acting again from within. And so then I question the functions of, well, first of all, do I want to feel like that? Because it is a choice. And no, I don't want to feel like this, but I am feeling like this. So if I am response able to these feelings and emotions, and if I'm in the awareness that I'm actually the one that is kind of flaunting myself again, then how can I undo this? Well, it's then by going, of course, within. And a key element in that for me has been finding the failure. So finding the external narrative within, the reflective aspect of what I'm witnessing is triggering something. So how is that mirroring something inside of me? And then going to that place, finding that memory, or finding that child, that time where that was occurring, and feeling into if I can come into acceptance of how I was failed. And when that conversation happens, most often the inner child or the aspect of self says, no, I'll never accept what they did to me, which is a great answer because now I have full dialogue with myself. And then I lovingly accept and welcome that. And all I have to do is ask, do you feel the share why? And whoa, that just allows that part of self to fully express what actually really happened, what the real injustice was really about. And once that has been released and felt, wow, I just come back to that same question. How do you feel? I hear you, I see you, and I feel you. And it's really been like this. I really get it. How do you feel about accepting that it's really been like this? And once the emotional tension has been released and that part has already been allowed to express and relate what was still stored in this bubble of poison, that is the self-inflicting, it's this weird dynamic that we keep just regurgitating that. It's almost like we're kind of bringing up a bit of bile and then swallowing it, and bringing up a bit of bile and then swallowing it again. It's not pretty, but there's a natural process in our human nature that has been discovered and put language around by so many people, and you yourself have so much awareness around. But that acceptance piece is so relevant, and I call that for myself, love and acceptance returns me to freedom. Because if I am in the state of reaction, I'm not free. I'm actually preoccupied with all that rah-rah and all that story, which I don't want to deny, but I want to cultivate that process of navigating through that so that I can come back to freedom, which is also what that part of self wants, because it actually doesn't want to be the bile. It wants to be free because it's been stuck there. And I just love for you to share a little bit around your experience in navigating this with other people, because it's such a unique, almost individuated process, because the story was unique. And yet there must be some commonality in the way of approaching this, Yvonne.
Well, yeah, I guess, when you say commonality, I think that the reason that humanity has got so lost and separated from itself, because it has been conditioned to believe it's faulty from the first, from the day they were born. And so the journey is to come back to that, innate state of love, which is not so much to do with I love you, because if you look at society, it's all about going to movies, that I love you, darling. We're constantly looking outside of ourselves to make other people fill that hole that we're creating with our inner stories. And they are our stories, and until we are able to come back and fully love ourselves, there is always a space for someone else to play with you and, bring you off center, as I call it. So that is the foundation that I aim for with everyone that I work with, and for myself. So just, talking about that, I'll give you an example. This morning I came across a situation where I suddenly felt very sad. It was somebody that I loved very much who was posting that they're advocating people to go and have this, whatever they're giving you, right? And so I felt, my response to that was, I felt a deep sadness first, and then I felt, for a slight moment, there was a judgment as to, if you're going to influence people, and this person has the capability of influencing, then make sure what you are influencing with is not going to harm. Now, so I had these emotions going on within me, and they didn't feel good. So if they don't feel good, then they're my emotions, and they have triggered something. Now, you talked about triggers, and I think this is something that people are not aware of, and that have come to realize that as we are born, we are, a blank canvas, right? We are not naturally human. Otherwise, we would know what to do. We don't. So we become an end product of other people's stuff, and that stuff is usually pretty crappy, right? So we become, I don't know if you ever watched Johnny Five, but wonderful movie of he runs around the robot. Johnny Five is alive, input, input, input. Well, that's what children are like. So whatever input they get, that is filed in this subconscious file. And so what happens is that you have an emotion, whatever emotion it is, good, bad, or indifferent, for a certain situation in your life at whatever age that is. And that creates a file that's put into that wonderful subconscious. Now you can be 65 and have the same emotion, but it will trigger the 2-year-old's emotion. This is where we get this phrase, don't be so childish, from. Because the only thing that you can do is to respond or react as the 2-year-old, because that's where the original trigger of that situation occurred. And until you understand that within your subconscious are all these triggers, that you come across a situation, let's say, I grew up with so much injustice around me. So for many, many years, and it's still every now and then it comes to the surface, this sense of injustice, that had a huge trigger inside of me, and I would react really quite violently at times. So until I put that to sleep and realized, and the way that I put that to sleep is to go, it's not happening now. I do believe deeply that everyone has their soul journey, and I have no business in it. If people come and ask for my support and guidance, I'm all theirs. But to go out and beat the drum of you should, that wonderful word that I said, I actually told the client this morning to write it on a piece of toilet paper and put it down the toilet, because it's such an obligatory word. It's kept us trapped for so long. You should be good. You should do that. And you should look after this person. Well, change it to I could. Do I want to? And the want to is it aligned with me? Is it, as you say, is that love for me? And if it isn't, you go, no. And if it is something that you would like to do out of choice because you are loving, then you can do it free from this sense of obligation, right? So I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but it is pretty multi-leveled, for people to find those triggers and to and I also believe that where we are now, once upon a time when I first started, we had plenty of time, but that time shortened. And now that there isn't that amount of time. And, there used to be, I don't know if you were in Australia in those days, but there used to be an ad for, what were they, vinegar chips or something. And it had a funny picture of barbecue chips. That's it. And when he said, "I'd love some barbecue chips," this barbecue came down and fell on his head. And I always remembered, and I think, yep, you've got to be very careful, because where we're going in this quantum field, you want a barbecue, it'll come and fall on your head really fast, because that is how energy is changing. It's happening so quickly. So that is the quickening we're going through. And therefore, I don't believe we need to do the digging and delving so much anymore. What we do need to do is to let go of the stories of the continuous self-abuse of our inner dialogue, and to come home to realizing that if you really know that you are this magnificent expression of source in human form, what is not to love?
So beautiful. Yeah, that's something that I really clicked with for myself, is that outside of that there's nothing to fix out there, that if we really want to make a difference in this world, then the most significant thing that we can do for our human family is do our inner work. Because what happens when we, because we're all interlinked through our collective consciousness. And as I cultivate the awareness, and as I find the language, and as I make it my practice to go within to find those parts of self and bring them home and name them, and I cultivate an expansion in my consciousness of how relevant this is. My channel is opening up. My frequency is tuning in with that. And that's what I'm emanating. That's what I'm sending as biofeedback into the collective. And let's say 40 years ago, what we are relating around now, when I wasn't even thought, this wasn't your conversation that you were going to be having on a Friday morning or a Thursday night, as a conversation about where are we going, and how what are the times that we are in. And certainly wasn't there any relevancy put on this language and on the conversation around this, because it wasn't really available. And that, as through the increase of diversification and complexification of our societal framework, which has brought about the complexification of traumatization, as I'd like to call it, it always brings about, it's not just that. That's just one way of looking at it. What it actually gives us is not just more reason, but more opportunity to, because we are wired for love. So if we're pushed into, and we're pushing ourselves into this direction of just more rubbish and more distortion and more confusion and more pain, sorrow, and depression coming about, what it cultivates on the other end of that narrative is more beauty, more abundance, more realization, more openness, more comprehension, more deeper understanding. And as I cultivate that deeper understanding in me, I am making that available to the collective. And that's not so much by me getting on these conversations with you and talking about this, although that has also a beautiful contributive factor built into it. It's really on the subtler frequency layers of our interconnected consciousness web as a human family, that as I become a nodal point of returning to truth of what is real and what is living, and what is, through my articulation, having a capacity to not just be a fantasy, but be an embodied awareness. That becomes a picture, that becomes accessible, and that becomes rapidly more accessible over the past, become more accessible over the past 20 years, and it just keeps increasing. Because in the past 20 years, we may have had those first pioneer species that were the gurus, and they were the, well, that was the succession before that, when the East met up with the West. But then we had the Anthony Robinsons of this world, and those kind of gurus stepping out, and the leadership guys and women that were trying to elevate people in self-empowerment. And if we actually look at that, there have been a whole bunch of successions, but now it's people like you and me that aren't having a fantasy of wanting to make this into some sort of enterprise, that are having this conversation on a daily basis with the people around them. And we are holding that field. I don't want to do small talk. Well, why would I want to talk about what I did talk about? I was already bored with it when I was 19. And that's why I started looking out for different experiences. And of course, I had to go out into the world and travel countries and move places. And in the end, I actually discovered that it was all inside. And that's where all the answers ultimately lie, because all the stories are there. But by me accessing that and cultivating the awareness of the relevancy of navigating into that internal landscape, I know that on a collective consciousness level, I am doing my part. and I'm doing a magnificent part, and I don't have to champion myself in it like, oh, how good that you're resolving your trauma. Look at you, trauma trumper. You're such a trauma trumpeter. It's so great. No, it's a process of cultivating love for self. And as I do that for me, people around me recognize that there's something different about me. And we have that form of magnetizing people. And I'm not here to then show them that they can do the same or rah, 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 because I don't put myself above them. And I feel that what we're able to be in that field of collective influence is this real, natural, harmonic vibratory frequency, which is our original vibratory frequency, but having upgraded that through this English language. Because when people were living in this state of consciousness of unconditional love, the world wasn't that complex, so it was maybe a lot easier for them to be that. I'm talking 400 or 500 years ago, thinking back of the Cathars and the Essene communities and the indigenous peoples that have had this close understanding of the interrelatedness of all of life and how everything is serving in one form or the other this beautiful emanation of God expressed in living form. And so we're doing that during a time of great acceleration. And I love to celebrate you and myself from a very kind of meek place, so to speak, that what we're doing on the internal landscape and through that being able to make ourselves available to others. Wow. What a beautiful natural gift. And the great thing is I'm the great benefactor. So it's like self-love that is almost like self-serving, but through that process I become a service to others. And what a beautiful symbiotic way of going within to assist the without. And I would like to welcome some of your reflections around this, because I have my little bubble of joy to share from. But yeah, I'm open to receiving your take on this, Yvonne.
Just listening to you and the way you're expressing it, my heart is just bursting, with love. And that's what it is. When we share that with each other, the ripple effect of that, because we are energy beings. So the effect we have in our surroundings is unseen. But again, because we are electromagnetic, then we start to attract those souls that are ready to make those changes. And they say, I want I want some of what you've got. And so I always have to laugh. I was thinking about that as you were talking. So a couple of years ago, when it was my 80th birthday, my daughter and my children wanted to give me a party. So I went to a restaurant nearby. And my daughter had contacted them from Malaysia and told them that her mum was coming because we wanted to book this 80th birthday party. So I asked for the owner. It was a restaurant I go to quite often. And she came out and said, oh, my daughter, contacted you about my 80th birthday party. And she just looked at me and she said, for you? I went, yes. Well, we had absolutely no discussion about the birthday party because all she wanted to know was how the hell did I look like this and do, because her mother was the same age and was, being wheeled in a wheelchair. And it was quite funny. And she said, so you must work out? And I'm going, no. And, well, what do you do? What do you do? And what's so difficult to explain is that it's not what I do. Well, it's who I've become as a result of coming home to knowing who I am. And I also remember when I first started, my first book was You Can Heal Your Life with Louise Hay. I go back a long way. May she rest in peace. What a beautiful woman. So, and her first words was, this is a rejuvenation process. And I went, I'm having that. I'm having that. And so I go to bed every night and I tell myself that, I ask my body and my body, mind, and spirit to restore itself, to rejuvenate and revitalize, and while I'm asleep. So I give instructions, but I was trying to explain to this lady that it was my state of mind that was the result of what she was looking at. And so every time I go to the restaurant now, she goes, "Oh, you are my inspiration." And I have to laugh and I go, but that's what it is, isn't it? The internal of you becomes the external of you. And so this is how you read people. When someone, I said to you earlier that your energy was better because than the last 2 weeks, because I read energy and I feel energy. It doesn't matter what you tell me about yourself. If your energy doesn't match what you're radiating, then I'm not buying it, right? Because that's all that I tune into now. We've become so attached to what I call the avatar. We've become so attached and so self-identified with the person, with this persona, that we forget. And I often say to people, look, have you ever seen someone, who has just died? Have you seen their body? And if you look at it, you go, well, what part did I love? Where has it gone? Because the body's still there, right? So whatever we are loving and what we're interacting with, the part that I'm interacting with you, is not this beautiful body that you have. That's your temporary vehicle, but it's the life force that you allow to radiate through this instrument. And when we can learn to see that and to have our self-identity more with the life force as who we are, rather than the instrument of who we are. I always say I love driving, but when my car is just a heap of metal sitting in the garage when I'm not in it, and the car can't perform its purpose until I get in it and I turn it on, and together we are this cooperative, coordinative force that gives us both pleasure. And that is what we have to learn. This is the instrument that allows our soul to live its purpose for incarnating. And that is really how I see it. And so my responsibility is to make sure that this instrument stays as well serviced as possible. And my soul has the responsibility to make sure that I am taken care of and kept in alignment and in an energetic vibration that is going to express my essence, which is of pure love and an ancient wisdom that I have tapped into. And so as long as the two of us are resonating and having this co-creative cooperative partnership, all is well. And you kind of become ageless, and you just get up in the morning and you go, oh, here's another day. We can play some more. And where are we going today? And who's coming our way today? And look, every week I have new people knocking on my door, whilst my friends are saying, well, don't you think you should retire? And I'm going, I don't have time to retire. What is that? Just make sure that whenever you put the lid down on the coffin, that you have it upstanding so I can keep going. Because I can't see it.
You're such an inspiration, Yvonne, and it's so beautiful, and it's such a privilege for me. It feels like to be in relating with you, and imagining myself and how I relate to my soul and my body, and that there's still work to do. I'm still very much stuck in my own little, fruity land of ideas, and what am I all doing, and what am I all sorting, and that's funny. And then I, will end up standing in front of the mirror. Like last night, I had an epic day. Spent like 10 hours behind the screen, finishing up all these things that I've been procrastinating on, and of course, that is the night that I'm having also a 4-hour meeting starting at 10, and or at least a series of them. And so I come home and I'm entirely drained and exhausted. And then I find myself in front of the mirror and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. You know, my mind feels like it's absolutely just blurry, blurry doo-doos. And my cells are just doing this phenomenal job of being this amazing body. And so I'm starting more and more over the past months to actually bring in that inner communication with body and with soul. And it's also been through our other conversations where we talked about connecting to soul. And it's beautiful. I hear myself and talk about it, and I hear you're relating to it, and I'm just hearing that I'm really just talking to myself. And then we had a beautiful conversation around relating to self, and I'm hearing that I'm actually also just talking to myself, and here I'm relating also really to my body and receiving what you shared and feeling like, yeah, that love and appreciation for the cells and that interplay and that collaborative working together, because we did come here with a unique gift and a unique soul purpose and a unique capacity to express. And it's when we get our different aspects of wholeness to come into synergy with each other and alignment, and that each part has a different function and role to play. And I love how you share that when you go to bed at night, that you give your soul and your body some instructions, like, well, this part, whatever that spirited nature of us is, that's just going to go and travel somewhere or go wherever it's relevant to process what has all been happening during the day. Meanwhile, while that goes and does that, the body and the soul come on, revitalize and replenish and restore the cellular metric of this whole being vessel that I am. And it's something that I want to take away from this conversation for sure, to be more conscious, because usually I'm just so tired that I just pass out. But bringing conscious awareness to that is so beautiful, and it's so simple as I hear myself say it. And then I wonder, well, why aren't you doing it? Well, I haven't made it practice. Practice forms habits. Somebody recently said to me is that you're either in patterns or you're in practice. And I still feel that around the words called learning, training, and practice, I still have some childhood stories. And that's probably, the 20 years of education that I had to go through to get a piece of paper. And I'm finding more resolve around that. But this language can sometimes just trip me up in and of itself. Just the word, learning, because I don't want to have to learn. But that's really all that we're naturally able to do here on the earth, is to come into more awareness. And that happens through a process of learning, which I don't like to call relearning, and remembering, so that I don't have to, just get stuck on the word you have to learn. It is beautiful to hear how you share on behalf of your own experience, what's not just working for you, but what feels to be that natural way of navigating being a human being here on the earth in this 3D, expanded into those accessible frequency bandwidths that I feel we're only just starting to really get into. And I love hearing how you share around that vibratory frequency of consciousness that you feel these people that you are navigating with in the newer sanctuary community development and growth and expansion, where they are at. And maybe you would like to close us out with that, because it's something that when we can see what that looks like, feels like, senses like, it just opens up for us.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I have to say. Just before I do that, I just very quickly want to say about the practice. It That's really vital that we all have a spiritual practice. So my practice very quickly, and we can have a longer talk about that maybe another day. Is that I get up in the morning and I sign up for work. In other words, I connect to soul, and what are we doing, kind of thing. And then I set an intention for my day. I intend my day to be a beautiful day because it's my day and I'll bloody well decide what to do with it and how it's going to work for me, right? Not somebody else. And then at the end of the day, I always start with gratitude, a gratitude journal, not just in my head. I force myself, no matter how tired, even it's only a couple of sentences, just to be grateful for whatever I'm grateful for, and we've got so much to be grateful for, and end up with feeling blessed. Because if you go to sleep feeling blessed, then you wake up feeling blessed. And then, of course, my little instruction is always to set my life force free to go and replenish itself where it wants to go, and the rejuvenation and the restoring and the rebalancing, and at the moment the recalibration, whatever is necessary to get to this higher state of consciousness. And I think that's a conscious living. So that's really the package that my practice that I've worked for many, many years. So getting back to the sanctuary, so I have a little letter that I give everyone who comes to the Brekkies new, and it is to say that if they decide to join us, they are not joining us for a social breakfast. They are entering a community that are focused wholly on creating a new earth, of love, of harmony, of peace, of equality, of open-heartedness, and of prosperity for all. So and not. I mean, if you're going out for brekkie and you get that, you kind of go, oh, okay. And so they're instantly introduced to that is what this community is about. And then if they'd like what the community looks like, then they join and they'd start to do their inner work, because the only way to then be like these people is to do the inner work, because these people have done and continue to do their inner work. So, it is showing it. We are way showers. And I'm always reminded that Jeshua ben Joseph never wanted to start a religion. What he kept saying, I'll show you the way. And this is what's happening. We are the ones that are now coming and showing the way to a higher state of consciousness, to what is now being called the Christ, coming home to the Christ consciousness. I don't like any word that has any association with any religious faculty. I'm completely a-religious and a-political, because they've screwed the world up enough already. So that's not in my new earth. Because all I'm interested in is a love-based society, and if you can't live there, I think the greatest problem on earth that we've fallen into is to allow fear to be our master, and that is the big one that needs to be overcome.
So beautiful, Yvonne. I already feel inspired to get on this conversation journey with you again next week, and talk about that piece, around the master. That for us, with our free will, it is a choice to choose who and what we want to really govern our orientations in this world, and how Joshua ben Joseph also really forelived that way of life in this myriad of showcasing the house, the life ways of casting out that devil, Satan, get behind me, and because it does require vigilance. This return to self-sovereignty is only possible through the metric of love, but it also requires a warrior spirit that is diligent, that is clear and directed, and has a spirited infused directive for its navigation. I want to thank you, Yvonne. This was really beautiful. It's so many lovely comments, and I bet that there's many more people that are going to be watching this. All of our conversations are on earthheroestv.com if anybody wants to find us there, and they are of this similar quality, but we're definitely gradually evolving the conversation into its natural landing place. It's so good to be here with you. Thank you again, and
Thank you.
we'll we'll tentatively schedule for the same time next week. How does that feel?
Feels fine for me. Just don't sleep in.
Yep. So good. I've got a new practice. I'm going to talk with my soul and my body at night before I go and sleep. So good.
I love you. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
It's just such a wonderful honor to have this. It's like a dance that we do. Love it.
Nice. Thank you, Yvonne. This
Bye
was
bye.
it. Ciao for now.
Bye.